Hi.
Thank you so much to all the people who have tuned in for our lecture series today. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker, Angela Williams. I'm Lindsay Benstead. I'm the director of the Middle East Studies Center at Portland State University. Dr. Angela Williams is Associate Director at the Center for South Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She completed her MA and BA in linguistics at Illinois and studied Arabic at the American University of Cairo. Today she'll be speaking to us about her new book, Hip Hop Harem, Women, Rap, and Representation in the Middle East, which explores women's participation in hip hop culture. A big congratulations to Dr. Williams. This is her dissertation that she has published as a book with Peter Lang, and hopefully she'll be giving us details about how we can purchase a copy of the book. I'd like to ask if you've got a question during the talk or after the talk, if you please type it in the comment panel, and we will make sure that we ask the question during the Q&A discussion after the talk. So once again, Angela, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to hear your presentation. So I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Benstead, for the introduction and the invitation. I want to thank Corinne Hughes as well for the invitation. And thank you all for being online now to hear me. I just feel like one great benefit of my job is to get to work with people at other centers, at other universities, and it's just been a real joy to get to know Corinne, her love for art and creativity and area studies. So I'm just really grateful to be here in this forum. I wrote some comments and they are going to be on a screen over here, and I hope it's not too distracting, but I'll be reading and playing some music a little bit later. Before I get into the talk, I just wanted to say a little bit about myself and what led me to this work. I'm a small town, rural Illinois native who was raised to have empathy and awareness about the world and what was happening in the world. And I was always interested in foreign language study. And so in 2001, I began to study Arabic at the university, like so many Americans did at that time. But what was unique and sort of, I think, different about me that I quickly perceived was just my background. I have personal family history. My dad or my grandparents were sharecroppers in Mississippi. And my dad remembers the Great Migration to Chicago and all of like the trauma and sort of racialized history and trauma that he lived out in his life is still really present, I think, in his life and you know, and therefore mine as well. And I think, you know, my life and my body. And I think there's a great amount of like racialized trauma and violence that we still see today, and people who have similar stories here in the US. And I think we just sort of had to like process it and just live with those stories. Yeah, so just to kind of acknowledge that I know what it's like to be othered. And I think it's out of this tradition too that we see hip hop culture come. And I think oftentimes when we talk about global hip hop, we remove it from that history, like sort of the racialized history that it has here of people. So yeah, I want to acknowledge that, and I might talk a little bit more about that a little later. But looking back when I first studied in Egypt, and ever since I've been to the region, I always kind of felt a sense of acceptance and embrace there and at ease. And so studying another language at another region made me think more about what it means to be an American. So why am I talking about this? Because I'm about to talk about women in another part of the world. And I want us all to think about our own lives and our own stories and our own representations, and what our stories, what do we represent? And I tend to think not only about those stories, but also the lenses through which we learn about the world and to come to know whatever we think we know about things. So as much as I want to talk about the content of the songs, I also want to focus on the lens through which we're learning about these women's lives, which is, again, through hip hop culture, which always harkens us back to this post-colonial experiences here in the US. So I think about like who I am, what I represent in the spaces, that I occupy. So that's what I'm doing right now, and ask you to do the same. And that's something I've learned from these artists, these women that I think that's what they do in their music. Okay, so I'm gonna do the presentation and then we'll have Q&A like Dr. Vincent said. So now I'm gonna start here with the visual presentation. I've got my screen shared. I'll touch on just some of the theory of my work and look at a few examples, and then we'll look at a few songs. So I feel like this work is, and the book is a response, right, to my own learning about this so-called Middle East region. And I know we have a few people from the Middle East politics class, and maybe other scholars who work on the region. And for me, it's just the region in general is very problematic, the terminology and how we classify the region. So, and it's the study of Arabic and the study of the region is so highly politicized. We often seek and we get our funding when there's a threat. And I just want us to really interrogate how it is we know anything about the region, and I kind of always think about our sources and where we get our information. So the three main ideas, I hope that we can, am I gonna move now? Oh yeah, I'm moving. Here's me, that's my contact. So three main ideas I want us to think about, from the bottom up, that you could go away with today, are thinking about knowledge production. Like, again, how do we know what we know? How do we know that? And who's making the knowledge? And where are we getting this from? And just about hip hop, why hip hop is so important. And so what, or just the relevance of the scholarship about women's lives and about the region. So I'll talk about each one of these quickly, and then I'll get to the artists and the music. So knowledge production. This is Medusa, a Tunisian rapper. She's actually not in the book, but okay. So what do we know about the Middle East, and how do we know it? What constitutes the Middle East? How else could we talk about or classify the region? These may be some of the questions you've had or dealt with, and you've already likely talked about how the region has been defined and created over time, the role of colonial powers and outside interests, internal conflicts. And I want to argue for art as being a valid site of knowledge production, just as we look at policy documents and research and specialist and expert observations and findings. I want to also, pose that we can look at the artwork of the region too. And for this idea, I'm building on the work. Let's see. These are just various Middle East maps. So I'm going to have resources also listed at the end of the talk too. But this ideology of art as a site of knowledge production, building on the work, particularly of post-colonial aesthetics, particularly McCarthy and Demetriadis, and their emancipatory visions in post-colonial art and critical pedagogy, which basically is using artworks in the classroom to connect with students from diverse backgrounds. I also draw on the work of Dylan to employ the artist's biographies to learn about their lives and influences and representations of global art. So looking at the artwork, but also then looking at the artist's own life and biography, finding out as much about her as you can. I build on the work of Baez and Durham in using discourse methodology, discourse ethnography, which is tracing discourse or the talking about a subject across multiple sites. So in my case, it's across media and people's lived experiences. And this regards popular culture as a site of knowledge production that affects people's lives about themselves and others. So pop culture, affects how we think about ourselves, affects how we view other people as well. And whereas I think that ethnography can sometimes privilege the point of view of the observer or certain participants, in discourse ethnography, we have the benefit of using, again, various texts, which for me, I'm saying texts are videos, songs, social media posts, and then if you interview and talk to someone, it's their own lived experience too. So how are these messages being received and reworked in people's lives? And finally, to find out what we know, so thinking about knowledge production, by centering on the lives of girls and women. And for this, I drew on the work of Dr. Brown. So those are all lenses I'm thinking about learning or creating knowledge about women's lives through these lenses, various lenses. So why is hip hop such, why is it so significant that the artists are using hip hop? Well, in the book, I refer to the hip hop aesthetic, which is this unique style of musical creativity and performance and being that this kind of music has brought about, in so much that it's recognizable and produced globally. And I look at it within the context of post-colonial aesthetics again and third world feminist studies. Um, Now I'm looking at the hip hop aesthetic as what can be reproduced as an assertion of local, regional, and national origin as well. So just sort of a very short explanation or brief few statements about hip hop in general in the U.S. It's arguably probably the largest U.S. cultural product and export and commodity and global phenomenon. And it's been subject to a lot of cross-disciplinary study already in journalistic work in disciplines such as cultural studies, media studies, linguistics, and anthropology. I refer to the work of Tricia Rose, 1994, and Chang as well. Scholars and artists and commentators agree that hip hop is a cultural movement that originated in the 1970s among youth of African, Caribbean, and Latino descent living in the South Bronx. Particularly in her book, Tricia Rose's Black Noise, Rap Music, and Black Culture in Contemporary America, she outlines the context in which US hip hop arose and emerged from displacement, urbanization, and industrialization. So according to Rose, in rap, relationships between Black cultural practice, social and economic conditions, technology, sexual and racial politics are constantly changing. Rose argues in her book, her newer book, which was 2013, Hip Hop Wars, What We Talk About When We Talk About Hip Hop and Why It Matters, that hip hop has drastically changed due to its commercialization, which is something probably most of you know and have observed. This commercialization, which has occurred since the middle and late 90s, according to Rose, encourages images that are overwhelmingly violent, misogynistic, and harmful to Black people in the US. However, hip hop remains to be a site of knowledge production and dissemination. Also, the production encourages sampling and inspiration and collaboration among artists and content. And the music and lyrics often deal with regional and local representations, which is why, possibly these artists were drawn to it. They just like the music, they like the beat. Several of the artists I looked at like to write, they write poetry and then they would put them to music and beats. So so what? Finally, the so what takeaway I hope you would take away is that in the arts, I think we see collaboration and commentary on the human experience that I'd argue we don't really see in any other field. And neuroscientists have even studied the impact of music on the brain, how it has a similar effect as food and other pleasurable experiences. So the arts are human, and I find no better way in humanizing the region and the world than through the arts. We can see the work of Jack Shaheen. This was a film that he put together called Real Bad Arabs, came from a text as well, which shows the negative portrayal of Arabs or Middle Eastern looking people in films. And I argue that the dehumanization of bodies affects all of our lives and livelihoods. So this is the reason why we see recent outrage in this country over silence or acquittals of the killing of Black people, African and African American children, men, women, by police or just other people in this country in recent years. There's such an outrage when people are feeling that justice just isn't being done. All of these people, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Philando Castile, both Amjeen Ahmed Arbery, these are lives cut short and we remember them. And I want to acknowledge them in this work. So the art and expression born out of trauma and violence of the US and of the African American experience inspires. But we can't take the art and value the art and devalue life. So how can we value Black life as much as we value Black artists is a question I have. So back to the book. At the heart of the book is what I hope is apparent, is the desire to center work on women's lives, on the words and representations of women themselves. And I'm going to try to talk about the book without giving all the secrets away. So hopefully entice you to buy it. But if we have more time, I'll give more secrets. I'll give more examples too. A little about harem, this word harem. So I chose to use this title in the word because of the mnemonics as well. It's an H. But also because of the fascination with women and the harem life, particularly displayed in 19th and 20th century European travel logs and art. And in hip hop studies, scholars have talked about script flipping, which is a communicative practice to verbally one-up your opponent by using a word or experience and turning it around to flip the script. And this is from the work of Smitherman, 1997. Using the script flipping feature of hip hop language, the term harem I'm using is redefined. It's not in an exotic space, but the hip hop harem is a space where hip hop dominates and women's expressions are normalized. It's normal to talk about things that women are going through. So I want to give also a little nod of recognition to this US artist, Mona Haydar, who has, I think, brilliantly sort of taken this up also in her work. She's a rapper born, I believe, in Detroit area or Flint, and she's a Michigan-born artist. Who's taken up these Orientalist tropes in her music and flipped them around, calling out racist notions of beauty. And if you get a chance to hear her music, I'd recommend it, or maybe we can try to play a couple of her songs later. Okay, so the artists I studied. So in the book, I use the lens of post-colonial aesthetics, as I mentioned, U.S. third world feminism and hip hop feminist studies to examine the diverse lived experiences of girls and women in the Middle East and the North Africa region through the lens of these 7 artists here. So the top one here is Shadia Mansour, who's Palestinian. This is Malaika from Lebanon. This is Sultana from Morocco. This is Mayem Mahmoud from Egypt. This is artist goes by Suska from Egypt. This is Amani from Yemen and Justina from Iran. And here is just a regional map with the little images on it. So you can just see the spread sort of representation there. And I'd be glad to talk about like why I chose them, how I chose them, how I don't have that here in the talk, but let me get through what I'm doing and then we can talk more about sort of methodology. So I look at these artists, and the majority of the work and their work, I was looking at their work in 2016, just to let you know the year. And I was looking at these artists and their work and representations to see particularly how their music and the message represents womanhood and girlhood and what it's like to be a girl or woman in their countries. I then talked to women from these countries. I let them view the videos and I'd ask them, what do you think about the song? What's the message of the song? Does that resonate true with you? Does it remind you of anything? And I used a purposeful sample. I talked to 8 people about the music. These were people that I knew closely and I knew they wouldn't mind listening to songs and wouldn't mind talking to me about their own experiences. To know their impressions and the extent to which their own lives were related to the music. This was to see how popular culture, again, is a medium for artists to create messages about daily lives and for how other women also are affected by those expressions. So here are the questions, that I was asking, the research questions. How are women appropriating hip hop culture and fashioning it to fit their own needs in their home societies? What are the issues that the artists take up in their lyrics and videos? What do other women from the region think about these messages? So from the earliest of the artists, they represent a span of over 17 years. So rapping in the region is not a new phenomenon, and women rapping is not entirely new. And I'll show you what I'm talking about there. So for the first one, we're going to go to the music now. For just the sake of time, I have 3 songs picked out, but like I say, we can do Q&A and play more too. So the first one is Moroccan rapper Sultana and her song Sawt Nisa, or the voice of women, voice of women. Sultana, whose real name, maybe I can scroll back up to her up here. Here she is, here in the hat. Let's see here for now. Sultana, whose real name is Yusra Okaf, was born in 1986 and grew up in Casablanca. Her experience since youth in various international education and other organizations occurred simultaneously with the advent of her participation in hip hop culture. Sultana experienced hip hop first at the age of 13 years old as a B-girl or dancer while she was studying at the American Language Center. She cites her early influences as being Tupac and Aretha Franklin. Her music and lyrics represent what is real, such as mental and physical abuse that women endure on a daily basis, she says. And this is a quote from an online article I read. By insults, by words, by media, by everything. She began rapping in an all-female group, Tigress Flow, and in 2008, the group won an award at the Malazine Music Festival. And the prize for winning that award was to get a video clip done. But I read in an interview she did that she said that though they won, the organizer of the festival said, well, they're just women and girls. They're just women. They're going to get married anyway and not practice their art. They're not going to continue being musicians. So, you know, I don't think the video clip really even matters to them. Sultana's solo music video, Sawt Nisa, which we'll watch, was released in 2010. The song is about prostitution in Morocco and alludes to the notion that girls and young women are forced into sex work in order to make a living to support their families. So why call them names, she says. They are struggling. Since then, she has returned. She's been back to the US to talk at various universities and in DC and performed. And since then, she also founded an organization called Youth Vision in Morocco. She visits villages for concerts and holds workshops for girls to teach them about her life and how to write and rhyme and express themselves. In another Arabic online article on a Sudanese website, she described how rap is the best artistic instrument to express youth's problems accurately and is the easiest way to say everything. When asked why she rapped, she went on to say that feminist rap is most able to receive the voice and worries and problems of women. It can tell those things that only a woman can tell, like inequality and abuse, prostitution, the oldest profession in history, she said, and poverty, ignorance, and societal oppression. Also, women can express experiences about sexual harassment and violence, as well as other private worries that a woman has. She went on to say that rap isn't what it's rumored to be. It is possibly the one art form that changed and accompanied young people to change the time and during the so-called Arab Spring because of the demands of change intersected with the lyrics of rap songs. Rap, according to Sultana, you know, shrouded those people and made them capable of this, to lead an intellectual and social revolution. So she has a very, high regard and opinion for what the music is able to do, like in her own life and others' lives. So let's listen to Sawt Nisa here. I need Spanish subtitle for some reason. I mean, that's the only one I could find right now. So, here we go. I think Corinne's gonna put in the chat, hopefully, if she's able to, the English translations. So at the bottom of your screen, I think there's an icon you can click on chat and then go look at that.
صوتي بغات تقول يتشوب ميوزك سلطانة كل مرة نتلاقى بيها كلامها كله كان ليها كره شوفها ما نعرفو يمكن حيت عارفاها تبغيها باش تصرف عمرها كله تسف عطاها كتب وراها طريق منها تجيب الصف بالخف بحالها حل بنات بعمرها شافوا الويل شربوا من الزمان الشمعة تفرط والليل بقى طويل علاش تقولوا بنت فرقة ماشية كيفاش احسن نكون احسن اليوم مازال نتبان نبقى غير السلاك وريونا طرق الهدايا عليها ما نتفاك هذه المغربية كي كتسمع هذه وحدة من بزاف وسط المجتمع صوت النساء يعليه راني نادي صوت البنات يدعي وسط بلادي صوتي قاتل تكون اللي قاتل تكون صوتي قاعد يبقاو لي باب التوبة محلول صوت النساء يعليه راني نادي صوت البنات يدعي وسط بلادي صوتي قاتل تكون اللي قاتل تكون صوتي قاعد يبقاو لي باب التوبة محلول كتشوف فيكم حياة عمرها اللي ضاع كتشوفوا فيها الحق رخيص كيتباع كتشوف فيكم كي هي بغات تكون كتشوفوا فيها شفت الدل شفت المدلول تبيع بشرافة حين نجوم رجالي لكين مين تدوز من حداكم ديروا فيها مسلمين تعيش خوتها حيتي تمام ساكن هما عايشين في الكيان وانت في الفيلا ساكن ما تلوموهمش ما تشفاوش ما تسبوش سالي جينا غصبكم تحت رجليهم ما تنساوش تقدر تكون امك تقدر تكون اختك تقدر تكون هي انا ولا انتيا صوت النساء اللي عليه راني نادي صوت البنات اللي ضايع وسط بلادي صوتي قاتل تكون اللي قاتل تكون صوتي قاعد يبقاو لي داير باب التوبة محلول صوت النساء اللي عليه راني نادي صوت البنات اللي ضايع وسط بلادي صوتي قاتل تكون اللي قاتل تكون صوتي قاعد يبقاو لي داير باب التوبة محلول اللي بغيت نقولو خليت بلادي كتبو اللي بغيت نوصلو العداد كلها تعرفو شحال من جامع عصرو كان خربة وشحال من راكع الماضي ديالو تخبى شحال البنات خرجوا الليل ونحاربوا شحال البنات عاقوا رجعوا وتابوا وانتي وحده منهم عمرك ما تنساي الوردة تبقى ديما وردة عمرها ما تتباعي صوت النساء اللي عليه راني نادي صوت البنات اللي ضايع وسط بلادي صوتي قاتل تكون اللي قاتل تكون صوتي قاعد يبقاو لي داير باب التوبة محلول صوت النساء اللي عليه راني نادي صوت البنات اللي ضايع وسط بلادي صوتي قاتل تكون اللي قاتل تكون صوتي قاعد يبقاو لي داير باب التوبة محلول صوت النساء صوت البنات صوتي قاتل تكون اللي قاتل تكون صوتي قاعد يبقاو لي داير باب التوبة محلول
Rap the North.
Okay, to that. Great. Okay. So throughout the lyrics of the song, Sultana takes on different voices. She's the voice of a woman who has a friend working in sex work to appeal an abusive lover. She has the voice of a woman doing this kind of work who is suffering from humiliation and a loss of self. She's the voice of condemnation to those who pay for women's services and judge them at the same time. Sultana's song is a strong example of how art speaks and answers back to the public about social problems. Rather than seeing the women as the problem, the song brings in other institutional factors and actors, such as economic systems and social welfare. In societies with high rates of unemployment and no social welfare systems that support abused women in dangerous living situations, there are few options for women to provide for herself and children. In the video, we see images of women in public spaces, and Sultana claims to be the voice of them all. This next video is from an Egyptian rapper, Maya Mahmoud, and it's really to Maya Mahmoud. I owe all of my work and research. I was just on YouTube one day and came across her video on Arab's Got Talent, which is something like American Idol competition show, and I just started Googling around looking for female rappers in the Middle East. First, I started Arab female rappers. So this was a few years ago. I learned about her, and so I'm very grateful for her. So she gained recognition in Egypt in 2013 as a finalist on this show. At that time, she was an 18-year-old college student majoring in political science. According to an online article in The Guardian, Mayam's family has encouraged her since the beginning of her music. As a child, her mother helped her read and write poetry. Her father encouraged her to write about issues that were important to her and those around her. In an Arabic interview with BBC World News, she said that she started rapping when she was about 10 years old, and she was writing poetry and then starting writing with a faster rhythm. When the time came for Arab Got Talent auditions, it was her father who encouraged her to try out along with her brother. She hopes that in the future, more girls will be inspired to rap and speak out against injustices in society. The issues that she has addressed in her song and her lyrics are problems Egyptian women face on a daily basis: sexual harassment, particularly in the streets, and the crisis of identity that women face as expectations are placed upon them by family members and others in their lives, and how men's actions affect women's self-esteem and self-worth. In another interview, she said, "I realized all the male rappers must have songs, must have a track in which they talk about girls and their clothes, blaming girls for everything around us, happening around us. That wasn't right. So I rapped about girls and the problems they face." She performed this song, Enemish Cigarro, which means I'm not a cigarette, at the Arab's Got Talent. And that's what we're going to look at now. All right. So this last example I have is from our Iranian rapper, Justina. She goes by the name Justina. Her real name is Farima, and she was born in Tehran. Let's see if I can go back up to her. Here she is in the denim. She was born in Tehran in 1989 and started rapping in 2008 when she was 17 years old. Rap-e Farsi is rap in the style of rap in Iran, refers to Persian rap that originated in the 1990s in Iran. It draws on Iran's poetic traditions and social issues and problems. It is within this tradition that Justina, who studied graphic arts in high school and completed her undergraduate studies in theater, began writing and rapping. She raps entirely in Persian, although she started out by memorizing songs and using the music of US artists Eminem and 50 Cent. She goes by the name Justina, she says, after Justin Timberlake, because she liked him. Most of Justina's music pertains to social issues or issues she's dealing with or issues connected to social events. And this information I got from a recorded something on YouTube, again, sort of a talk show, independent talk show host called Persian Paparazzi that I saw a male correspondent interviewing her. Most of her songs are her original lyrics. One song is based on a poem by Farouk Farzad. And the interviewer asked her, why does she appear aggressive in all of her songs? Her answer was, paraphrased, that when a song is in protest, the artist must be aggressive. She wants to express her thoughts and her feelings in her music. And these feelings could be aggressive. It's how I feel, she said. I can't control it. For instance, in the song that we'll see, Be in Azadi Bekhand, laugh at this freedom, Justina is trying to remind women that they are important and have value, and that what is called freedom is not real freedom. She said that men are freer, for instance. Women are not allowed to go out and return home late, but this isn't necessarily freedom, rather a behavior that might be considered negative. If it's a negative behavior for one, then it's a negative behavior for all, she said. She said that some men misunderstood the meaning of the song, but there were others who understood her and thanked her for it. Justina believes that it's important for rappers to give a message that's important to people. As she explained, when rap first originated, this is all in her interview again, she said that when rap first originated, the music was mostly created in protest, and later other topics and genres of rap emerged, and she's talking about in the US, such as party rap and lyrics that dealt with topics such as drugs and sexual identity. But she thinks that when rap music first began emerging in Iran, the artists didn't have such proper education about the history and the development of rap and hip hop culture in the US. She sees rap as a style without limits and borders, so the artist can do what she wants. She relates this to Iran's poetic tradition, which included ancient poets who used strong words. In the US, she said, artists may be talking about drugs and sexual identity and experiences, but rappers should be real and speak about what influences them. She hopes that music in her country, no matter the genre, would increase so that all people can enjoy music and continue enjoying music. So here, let's play Be in Azadi Bekhan, laugh at this freedom. And again, if Corinne could put the translation in the chat, it's not subtitled.
میگم حرف اگه تو زودتر به دلشه. این چیزایی که میخوام بگم تحقیر نیست، بفهم حرفایی که میزنم یه تهدید نیست. ببین جنس ضد من برای ادامه نسل همه چشما به تو، همه دعا به دور شکم مادری که میخواد منقلب کن. اگه تو بیرون بیای دنیا رو مضطرب کن. ببین جنس ضد من تثبیت نشدم، من واسه تو یه موجودم که تعریف نشدم. تو دست کسی بودی که اجنس خودم، تو گوشت خونده خنده من جلفه گذر. اگه ساعتهای آخر شب واسه من نرو، اگه فوش خار و مادر اصلا واسه من نرو، اگه تعجب نمیکنن از بد بودنه، اگه هم خوابیات نشونه که سر بودنه، اگه کرم درختیم که تو دنبالشی، اگه بزنی و بری به من میگن، اگه فرق نیاز من و تو هرزگی میشه، اگه تن واسه تو یه چیز بیارزشی میشه، اگه خیانت تو عدم زنیت منه، اگه خیانت من خلاف طبیعت زنه، اگه بعضی وقتا پولو به تو ترجیح میدم، اگه وقتی به پول میرسی من تعویض میشم، اگه گرگا که با ناموسه میپرند و میدری، اگه خودت گل میشی واسه ناموس دیگه، اگه مهم میشه فکرات و جسارتم، اگه وقتی منو میخوای که تو اسارتم، اگه تو بهشتم باشی چشت سیر نمیشه، اگه گلم خوش نباشه دلت گیر نمیشه، اگه همیشه دنبال یکی بهتر از تو هم، اگه وقتی یائسگی دیگه خارج از دارم، اگه من باعث جهنمی بودنتم، اگه تو وجودت اراده ای مونده یکم بذاریم یا عمره که تو اسارتی، میگن ذاتت همین توی به این راحتی، به خدا اینه ها فقط واسه ارزشات قبول بی ارادگی ده. آخه بگو تو که یه بارم تو به هرزگی یا مهم نرسن، یه بارم تو از خوبیات بخون و حرف بزن. ببین جنس ضد من به این آزادی بخون، حسام ارزش تو مرد به این آزادی بخون. ببین جنس ضد من به این آزادی بخون، حسام ارزش تو مرد به این آزادی بخون. آره بخون به این آزادی بخون.
Example I have want to show references. So in the book as well, I draw on some of the audience interviews and their responses to the videos, but I don't have much time to go into that now, but we could maybe talk about it. So the 7 artists that I profile represent women's increased participation and identification with hip hop culture in the region over the past 15 plus, 17 plus years. Specifically and broadly, the notion of women as cultural actors exercising their voices in creative ways in the region. Even though all the artists may have had some kind of influence or from or admiration of rappers in the US, each is adamant that she is not merely an imitation, but she is developing her own style as a rapper. This style is informed by her individual experiences, as well as collective set of memories, narratives, and realities within her family and country of origin. These profiles, in the book I have a little profile for each one, and they show the artists, the individualities and how each write out of their experiences. Their music is a soundtrack of their lives, and they draw on traditional poetic musical traditions as well as their experiences and have a progressive vision for their own lives and the lives of girls and women. So these texts, the songs, videos, and also I looked at their social media profiles as well, combined with women's real life experiences, make more accessible women's voices from the region. Through their articulations of agency and liberation, the rappers display what Sandoval has called differential oppositional consciousnesses. They have an awareness that they are coming against something, and in different ways, and they know that. In their personal and professional networks to imagine a better future for women in their societies. And I argue that hip hop feminism as a theory and within critical pedagogy, within teaching and learning, can be applied to this region, or the Middle East, North Africa region, to develop more different, varied, emancipatory, freeing epistemologies, ways of thinking about things, and learning about the perspectives of womanhood and girlhood in the region. Thank you so much. Here are references. And here's a plug for the book. If you want the book, please email me and you'll get a t-shirt too, a free t-shirt. So thank you so much.